Honorable dignitaries and dear friends, on the dais and off the dais. When Mr. Gogna asked me to introduce Venkatramani today, I said, we are here to listen to his journey, and any introduction will take away from that precious time. Nevertheless, I said, can I speak for 5 minutes? So Mr. Gogna's reply was, can anyone introduce Venkatramani in 5 minutes? And he was right. However, I shall attempt to do that impossible task within 5 to 6 minutes, with your permission. As an admirer and a dear friend of Venkatramani for the last 4 decades, as Gugnaji rightly said, it is indeed an honor for me to introduce Mr. R. Venkatramani, the 16th Attorney General for India, brilliant lawyer, senior advocate, scholar, jurist, activist, author, poet, mentor to so many. He's the first lawyer to be appointed the Attorney General for India directly to this constitutional position without having held any other officer's position. He's also the first, for us AORs, that's very special. He's also the first advocate on record to adorn this highest constitutional office. And that too, in the tenure of the present Chief Justice of India, Honorable Justice U. Lalit, who is also the first advocate on record who is the Chief Justice of India. I don't know what scora the Supreme Court Advocates on Record Association is waiting for to celebrate this momentous milestone. Upon hearing Venkatramani's appointment, before I even spoke to him on the phone, my mind went back to his mentors and how proud they would have been. One great academic, one great constitutional lawyer, three great Supreme Court judges. The first is the legendary Dr. N.R. Madhava Menon. Ramani, as we friends call him, was his star pupil in the law school at Pondicherry. How proud Dr. Menon would have been to see young Venkatramani as the Attorney General for India today. The second is late Mr. P.P. Rao, who first taught at the Campus Law Center before joining the legal profession as a practicing lawyer. Venkatramani was in his chamber as his junior associate, and that is where I believe the activist in Ramani really blossomed. Proud Rao sir would have been a great constitutional lawyer himself to see this day. And three great judges who have been his judicial mentors. The late Justice Bhagwati, former Chief Justice of India, the late Justice Chinnappa Reddy of the Supreme Court, before whom he flowered as a young lawyer. Fortunately, his third judicial mentor, former Chief Justice of India, Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya, a legend in his own lifetime, lives to see this happy day and to bless his mentee. Ramani's professional life is well known, and it features on Google for everyone to see. His legal practice spans across constitutional law, human rights, civil and criminal law, service law, consumer law, law relating to indirect taxes, and several others. The recognition of his stature by the highest court, appointing him amicus curiae in so many important cases, speaks for itself. But for all of us who have observed him closely, what has always stood out from his young days is his courtroom advocacy that has remained persuasive never combative. It has symbolized a leadership style at the bar that has become almost sadly rare. To my mind, this style is the crucial X factor, which, when added to a litigator's legal argument, makes for better justice. His academic contributions are as varied as can be, from his indispensable role as member of the Law Commission to his role as member of the Ethics Committee of the ICMR, member of the Committee on Direct Principles of State Policy that reviewed the working of the Indian Constitution, his involvement in drafting of the Nepalese Constitution, life membership of the Indian Society for International Law, now presidentship of the Human Rights Defense International, to his presently working on the scope and application of international instruments in domestic law, in domestic lawmaking and judicial enforcement, to many more national and international role, and that will require a separate event. I'm not even mentioning the awards that he has received. Another very, very special attribute that is not easily found today is that in spite of his eminence for so many years, he has retained his humility to the T. Along with his accessibility, especially to the junior bar, that has greatly valued and admired him for it. All those who he has guided and mentored will vouchsafe for that. His very special commitment to Gen Y through several law schools of the country on which he has been on governing bodies and advisory councils. They say behind every successful man, there is a woman. But may I say, in Venkatramani's case, Vijaya, Mrs. Venkatramani, has been the woman in front, his pillar of support, his moral compass, his spiritual partner, his Ardhangini, his true Ardhangini. In conclusion, I wish to underline the challenge and the challenges before the Attorney General when presents the state. Mani's own words through one of his poems, and I'm doing this without his permission. Every word is poignant here. He has called the state a leaky umbrella. Splendid theories of the state, drawn from yonder bitter dates, when kings and queens and popes and mullahs drew their swords and stretched their lands to rule without the rule of law. The guillotines, the Bolsheviks, the Red Guards, and the Cold War. The East and West in combats drowned, theories of state in concepts great, etched all deep in constitutions great. Umbrellas for all, thy name is state. Rights for all is the job of the state. All noble thoughts of equal treat, the state will deal with zeal and greed. The rule of law, the state is law. With even hands and equal stretch, the state will rule all resources for common good. The never served in times too long, the poorly served through leaky schemes, the underserved by fates betrayed, all partners in a common train. Freedom, freedom, many do cry. Liberty and life, their meanings never dry. And the important one here, the state must look fair, far, and wide. The state must hear all claims with no hide. The state must weep with those in pain. The state must ensure markets thrive. All sides are edgy, all sides are thorny. No highways where all can ride in caravans of equal size. And finally, the umbrella is of doubtful size. To cater to all hands so large, the heavy downpours beating hard, the leaky spots in times too short, are battle spots for theories wrong. May you fix this leaky umbrella, Ramani, and hold it high with pride. Wish you great success. They don't make them like you anymore.
Let me first thank all those who are standing out here bearing the invitations on my behalf. I must thank you first. Well, I think I am not here today to make myself speak about myself, not in the fitness of ethics to engage in self glorification. When Mr. Gognaji asked me for a meeting with the HRDI after my appointment as a facilitation event, I politely declined. But the president of HRDI, I cannot refuse to meet my own team. I would have greeted them as a colleague and exchanged views on the unfinished agendas of HRDI. That would have been a closed door exercise. I am very clear that I am keen to avoid any personal advertisement, either for public space or for professional advancement. I would like to remain what I was when I entered the portals of the Supreme Court way back in 1979, not knowing at that point of time the importance of being in Supreme Court. But Mr. Gogna was unrelenting. He insisted, my friends at the bar may like to hear some juicy stories of my career. My dilemma is, what do I share, which may be beyond the transient value, and do I have anything of that nature to share? Do I have any part of my career or life which have any outstanding essence to be shared? The answer is no. Those who have sacrificed their lives, their time and mind to the welfare of the community are a class apart. Those who have risen in life's graphs and achievements despite deprivations and odds are another class. Those who renounce all that is of value to their life and pursue societal good are yet another class. I don't belong to any of these classes. Therefore, what do I share? And what is this my journey? So there are many things so personal, deeply personal, which even probably Mrs. Venkatramani would not have known. I may like to share. But my first question is, why do I share? For all of you who are here, wanting to probably hear from me as an Attorney General for India as to what might have contributed to my being here, I have no answers. Maybe the answers lie somewhere else. But if you want to hear from me, what are my passions in life? And how did I understand the life of a lawyer? And what kind of life's journeys which brought me to this point of time in my career, I may have something to share. Whether they are of any value or not is for you to take away. Long years ago, I come from a far southern part of this country called Pondicherry, a beautiful place, a quiet, lovable area, which has, in recent times, has produced one of the greatest saintly figures, Sri Aurobindo. And happening to study in another great institution in Madras, Loyola College, I studied physics. And while I was there, I happened also to become a member of the Madras City College Tamil Union. I got connected with a larger number of people or students, and that took me into a very close confines of a few select set of friends who remain my friends even today. And one of them is a practicing lawyer in Madras, dedicating his life entirely for the cause of human rights without any advertisement again. Others have gone into other pursuits of life. Somebody went to Malaysia and became a journalist. While we were away on a travel to another part of South India called Nagapattinam, to which one of them belonged, we were walking on a market street. You know, we have this Monday bazaars, Tuesday bazaars, where markets are open in any part of the country, where the most ordinary men and women sell their evening wares, mostly vegetables. So here was an old woman who was selling tomatoes in a basket. So a burly policeman comes around and says, "Not here, not here." So she has no time to pick up a basket of tomatoes, which probably gives her the day's earnings. So before she could do anything, he just kicks the basket of tomatoes and they vanish into thin air. I was watching this event. I thought I must go and stop this policeman from doing this, the most bullish act. But my friends around me told, don't be an MG Ramachandran. You know, MGR was a great hero in Tamil. And then you will find him at the most appropriate time when the heroine is in difficulty. So my friend said, don't be an MGR. Your enemy up there is far stronger than you. Learn about how to handle somebody who is stronger than you. And he's not going to listen to you. And learn to talk when somebody will probably listen to you. Till you find that somebody is going to listen to you, don't talk at all. It was a great piece of advice by my friend, who was equally young in age. I remember this incident because it was always fresh memory as to how one human being can be so cruel to another human being. So I think my understanding and journey into law began much later, but this was so deeply etched in my mind. How can one human being be cruel to another human being? A very basic question about life. But we continue to be unkind, we continue to be, cruel, either as individuals or groups or as a nation or as even as civilizations or even as religions. So this is something which is so deeply etched in my memory when I began to study law. I was so fortunate that Professor Madhava Menon, who was still teaching in Delhi University, came on a sabbatical 3-year leave or to Pondicherry and became the principal of the Pondicherry Law College. Within a period of 6 months or so, as destiny would have it, he began to have a liking for me, and it was a mutual friendship club which began to grow like a big banyan tree over a long period. And I remember he's taking class on sections 299 and 300 IPC almost for a month. And I also remember, all of us know, in the Evidence Act, the word what is proved. So he almost took a class on what is proved over a month. Why I am talking about it is, some of those pickups in your study of law become part of your mind. When they become part of your mind, how you look at everything around you, how you look at the life of people around you, and how you look at your own life in order that it makes sense to others' lives, I think they become very important. So my study of law became not a study of law for becoming a mere professional, but a study of law in the larger context of its relevance to life, social ordering, and more just a social order. And that probably was one value which has traveled throughout my career as a lawyer. And before I talk about some of my very interesting encounters in my professional career in Supreme Court, soon after this incident which I narrated, as part of the group in the Tamil Students Union, we began running a journal. It went on for about a year and a half. We contributed in our own way. I had occasion to meet some of the tallest figures in public life, including Mr. C. Rajagopalachari. And soon thereafter, when we completed our graduation, this friend group dispersed to different parts of Tamil Nadu. And since Madras Law College declined admission to me, I got admission in Pondicherry Law College, and that's how Professor Menon's friendship came to me. So we continued publishing a new journal. Again, we called it the New Moon. We thought, and the people who were with me we formed an association called the Indian Youth Association. The motto was "Youth alone can save India." And what we used to do, used to go around the big parks and in Chennai city, print a small pamphlet with some very catchy slogans and distribute it and say, tomorrow will be a meeting, those of you who are interested in come. We started doing this exercise only to find out if youth around this, in the city colleges would be inclined to join this so-called little nascent movement. We did it for quite some time, and I think that was one exercise which probably laid the foundation for me to become a reasonably good public speaker, if not an orator. And one of those very memorable pieces which you wrote was during just when emergency was clamped. I wrote a piece on Indira Gandhi's socialism. It was a critical piece. And 15 days after that piece was written, there was, this X branch police in every state. They are the intelligence wing. So one of the policemen came to the law college and told Professor Menon, we heard there is somebody, a student called Venkatramani here, we would like to interrogate him. So Professor Menon was a little upset about it, and he called me and said, what have you done? I was wondering, what have I done? I asked myself this question. Then I remembered I wrote this piece and I told him this is what happened. He said, be a little careful, this is emergency and you can disappear anytime. So, but he told that ex-branch inspector that he is one of the brightest students here. I don't think he's got any political affiliation. And but still, the inspector wanted to have a look at me and have a exchange of words with me. I went and shared my thoughts, and probably he thought they are not too radical, and the story ended there. In that way, but that story opened up lots of other encounters for me. That article probably fell in the eyes of many left-leaning intellectuals in universities and colleges. So I began to receive lots of calls. Those calls means physical visits, not the mobile call or all that kind of stuff. Why I am talking about it, suppose I had not been exposed to this part of life, my understanding of law would have been very, very different. I suppose all of us need to have a kind of an exposure which is not confined to one ideology or one way of life or only one way of looking at everything. An exposure to a wide range of thought processes is what enriches our own thought process. And that's the doorway, I think, to the deepest values of our own country. So, but then when I moved to Supreme Court, courtesy Professor Menon, There are other very deeply personal aspects which may not be of any interest, and I don't think I should uh, take you on to those things. So soon after a time when I was looking for a shift from practice from Pondicherry, where I was practicing in the public prosecutor's office, and I was looking for Chennai as my next abode. So Professor Menon called me and said, "You are not going to Chennai, you are coming to Supreme Court." What a great teacher he was. I couldn't believe that he has made all these arrangements, and he came all the way to Pondicherry, Madras, and then spoke with me as if he was persuading his own family member to do something good, right? And so touching. So I said, "Sir, Delhi is a completely strange place. I don't have any soul who is known to me there." He said, "Please be prepared to take risks in life and come to Delhi. You will receive a letter from Mr. P.P. Rao very shortly, and that's the end of the chapter." I got a letter, and I landed here in February 1979. So this part of my life may not be very big. As I said, those three classes of people: people who sacrifice their life and mind, people. So if I don't belong to any of those class, but still there is something which I can share with you, and this is how probably the story has some small chapters. So my connection with some of those ideologies continued after my practice in Supreme Court, shifting here. So in the early part of my career, I have done a lot of free service to people who are being prosecuted, particularly belonging to the ML ideology. Not because I believed in the ML ideology, but because they deserve justice. And but that also brought me to knowing more and more about the Marxist ideology. I began reading. Of course, I have read Das Kapital from bottom, to cover to cover. So your fascination, look here, the world is full of inequality and injustice. So what is that one can do about it? Is there a room through which law can do something? These are the kind of ideas. So in 1983, when I was speaking in a small symposium, maybe of a few, 10 or 20 people, lawyers, and so one gentleman who heard me in the symposium came home that next morning and said, "I'm proposing to set up a free legal aid center in Delhi. Would you like to head it?" And he was a Christian father of a very uh, called great background, settled in Gujarat, coming from Kerala. So this was a great appeal to me. Almost about 4 years into profession in Supreme Court. So I said yes. So that took me from 1983 to almost till 1997, when I was designated as senior advocate to be in charge of this free legal aid center. Though located in Delhi, it did a lot of work almost in several parts of northern India. I traveled extensively with Father Joseph, his name was, into Gujarat, Bihar, UP, Madhya Pradesh, except Northeast. And in the pursuit of knowing people, in the pursuit of doing justice, mostly of those class of people belong to Adivasis or women, children, and so on and so forth. In the course of one of those journeys, and it came to me that our criminal justice system needs fundamental and radical changes, particularly when it comes to the lack of comfort which our court system does not have for those who are the most deprived sections of the community. The lack of comfort. Courts must be a place of comfort where the pain you have suffered elsewhere must be resolved with the least pain. So, how do we make courts a place of comfort? this issue is still confronting me. And of course, I think it will continue to be part of my journey till you serve till the end of your life. So, in one of those situations, an Adivasi woman was outraged in police custody. Number of policemen are involved. So, I got a call from Father Joseph as to what do we do in this case? Do we go to a magistrate and file a criminal complaint? What do we do? I pondered over for a couple of days and said, no magistrate, no private complaint. We will file a petition in the Supreme Court raising a question that if there is a custodial violence, what is their accountability under law? And I also looked into the criminal injuries compensation scheme, which is already part of the legal system in UK and New Zealand and few other Commonwealth countries. So therefore, the idea of reparation of a victim who does not have a recourse in law was so strong in my mind. We moved this petition in Supreme Court, and Chief Justice Bhagwati entertained this petition. I remember that very interesting afternoon when Ram Jethmalani was also sitting by my side, and when the petition court entertained the petition and issued notice and passed an interim order appointing a commission of inquiry. This commission of inquiry gave a report virtually indicting all the policemen and up to the level of an assistant collector who tried to cover up this case. On the basis of the report, the court ordered prosecution. The prosecution ended within a period of 2 to 3 years. The policemen were prosecuted, matter came up to Supreme Court, appeals were dismissed. In the meanwhile, on the question of reparation or compensation for a victim, this question was raised before the court and the court passed an order by way of an interim compensation. I continued to pursue this idea much, in several other cases. And somewhere in 1993, you will find Delhi Domestic Working Women's Association of the Union of India. The Supreme Court passed a very brief order and capturing this point, asking the National Commission of Women to pursue this idea. Why I wanted to share this is these are ideas which come to your mind when only your mind is deeply engaged in unraveling the parts that must be unraveled and can be unraveled provided you have the will and the intuition to do so. I think every one of us can do that. And I think the responsibility, the fundamental ethics of a legal profession means that kindly unravel with the best of your ability and intuition all the best answers possible as to the most intricate and challenging questions in law and justice. If all of us have done it, even in some small measure, I'm sure that we would have been the most satisfying part of our life. So I'll count a few more examples and try to complete this narration. I can go on. Of course, when storytelling happens in a particular way, we all get interested. But beyond a point, it must end. So there was again another case from Pondicherry, where I come from. A textile mill was lying closed, and for over 3.5 years, agitations after agitations. So there was no end in sight. So one of the trade unionists, who was known to my father, came one day and said, I went to Madras and consulted very senior counsel there as to something can be done. This is about again 1984. You know, those good old days, we have the Industries Development and Regulation Act of 1957. The pre-liberalization days when. So under this act, many of you are aware of the Swadeshi Cotton Mills case, 18AA of the Industries Development Regulation Act, natural justice, post-decision natural justice, so on and so forth. So he said, I consulted several lawyers, all of them said nothing can be done. Court will not ask, command the government to, to take positive steps and things like that. I thought for a while, I think that's a wrong idea, and looked into the law. We filed a petition in Supreme Court on behalf of the union, and a bench of Justice Chinnappa Reddy and Nagesh took the petition and gave very interesting interim reliefs. The workers Almost for a period of 6 months, the workers got monthly cereals and a payment of 1,000 rupees per month those days. And a year later, the government of Pondicherry and the union government took a decision because of the push of the Supreme Court that they will set up a Pondicherry Textile Corporation and took over the mill. The mill was taken over and began to run. So what persuaded me to go into this closed doors of understanding law? I think the passion for being a just human being and to use the tool of law as expansively as possible in advancing the ends of justice. If that passion is there, I think all of our journeys are wonderful. So I keep telling students, I do a lot of teaching in several law schools, and I do tell everybody that look here, of course, the goal of life is to be comfortable in life, earn as much as one can, but beyond that, there are other goals. And if you don't aim at those goals, well, you may be a successful lawyer, you may be a very sought after lawyer, but probably you are a very poor human being. So, how to be a rich human being is the question. How do you really become a rich human being, a human being? So, I am not here to talk ill of anybody. I am not offering comments on anybody, and I have never done that. My only endeavor in sharing these few ideas is to say that this nation deserves a great amount of assistance and engagement by all of us. If this nation has to continue to be what it has been and what it was and what it has been and what it can be, so I think the legal profession has an immense responsibility, and that responsibility can be discharged in small little measure and in huge ways, depending upon our own little reaches and the ability. All of us can do that. And I don't want to say all this again to teach to you, because many of my friends here are far more mature, experienced, knowledgeable, and scholars, and I don't want to teach them. Please don't take that I'm teaching any one of you. But if you have to ask me about my journey, then the only thing I can say is there is some teaching in my journey. That's all I can say. So, when this appointment came, the first day I sat in the chamber and looked at all those wonderful photographs of those illustrious attorney generals who adorned this chair and made seminal contributions to justice in our country over a period of 75 years. I asked myself a question, am I here rightly? What made me come here? And why do I have to share this question with you? Because I think an office is not merely something which generates any personal advancement. I think an office is a calling. An office is not only a calling, an office is only every office, I think, is created for a certain amount of responsibility. So, I sat back in my chair and said, yes, there are some responsibilities, which I hope I can discharge. That was a little consolation and comfort which I gave to myself. And Sadhana is a great friend of ours. We have traveled together almost from the year we landed here in 1979-80. I remember one of those cases which he wanted me to draft and file, Sri Lanka Vidyarthi versus State of Uttar Pradesh, where soon after Mr. Mulayam Singh Yadav government came to power in 1979 and 80, they threw away all the public prosecutors and government counsel in one by one stroke of pen. So Supreme Court intervened and laid down wonderful propositions of law about Article 14, contractual employment, so on and so forth. She was the one, she introduced me to this sea of people. So after This case was filed and matter was heard and judgment was delivered. Almost every second day, I used to get calls from all possible assistant public prosecutors, ADCs, PPs from all parts of UP. I mean, that was a great thrill. I got, now I am in UP. Right? So it was one of the wonderful gifts which Sadhana had given to me, and thereafter we have traveled together in several journeys of professional engagements, and not to forget my dear friend Raju Ramachandran, who is another wonderful human being. And in the 80s to 90s, we had been very close with each other, exchanged thoughts, personal thoughts, professional thoughts, and then looking at new judges who come in and go and talking about them in course in whispers and murmurs and all those kind of wonderful stuff. So I am thankful to her for coming here. I said, so any talk about my journey, if at all is relevant, will be incomplete without your presence. So just to complete one more last few limbs of my journey, soon after my designation, which happened in 1997, I, the designation came as a surprise to me. I never thought you can become a senior advocate. I had worked all along filing cases, arguing cases myself. So suddenly when this happened, it was a huge, treasure house for me as I then understood. So almost for a year soon after my appointment, designation, I was not actually, in Supreme Court. There was another engagement which came to my hands. The National Thermal Power Corporation has a lot of factories in UP, Madhya Pradesh border area called Shakti Nagar. So they had acquired about 25 villages of land, and World Bank had funded the project of NTPC. So the question of rehabilitation of those people whose lands have been acquired continued to be a problem for NTPC and the World Bank. And the World Bank team came and said, no, we cannot handle it. We need a domestic panel of people who can handle this and settle this. So NTPC and Power Ministry went around, including World Bank, went around searching for some retired judges of the Supreme Court or the High Court to head the panel. So they found it was too costly for them. They cannot afford a helicopter visit of a retired Supreme Court judge every time from Delhi to, Banswara, whatever you call it. So then hunt began. Through what source it happened, I have no idea. So it happened, I was picked up as the chairperson of this panel. And we had two other members, one a retired joint secretary and another academic from Hyderabad. So almost for a year, I spent my time in settling this issue. Used to travel from Delhi to Varanasi and by road. Used to stay in those villages, and much to the displeasure of NTPC officials. And there are occasions when I called the NTPC officials to stay in the villages along with the villagers to understand their pain and anguish. So almost after a year, we were able to settle to a large extent the rehabilitation issue. Why I'm talking about is soon thereafter, we have the 2013 Act, Land Acquisition Act. So between 1990s and 2000s, there were a larger number of litigations all over the country, including Supreme Court around the deficits in the Land Acquisition Act, particularly the vulnerable sections of the community. There were large amount of discussion took place, parliamentary discussions, committees, and so on and so forth. So soon after we did this work, I was called upon to share my ideas on what kind of inputs can go into a new land acquisition law. So, and that was very interesting. So to share an idea and then to be able to persuade somebody that you can look at a new chapter in the law of land acquisition. Of course, today we have lots of problems about this new law. That's a different story. And maybe this is, it's creating obstacles, etc. That's a different story. Why I want to talk about is these very unusual engagements outside law brought me into law and then to understand law more and more. So I think I must thank Professor Menon for doing all this. And in the early part of my being here, courtesy Professor Menon, I was introduced to almost all the Supreme Court judges between 82 to 85, and one of the most important figures in my life, if I cannot, I'll be wrong in not mentioning it, is the great legendary Justice V.R. Krishnaya. So both when he was on the bench and after he demitted office, I worked very closely with him, and one of the occasions we went to Chaibasa in Bihar for a lecture, some work on human rights organized by the Xavier Institute of Management. We went to a small village in the evening. Krishna wanted to know something about a village. He said, take a jeep and let's go. So we went around in a jeep and he asked me to stop at some place. There was a house where he stopped and he wanted to know, to meet the household people. People around us were looking, what is this Justice Krishna doing? What is this place? What's wanting to know? So he was very, very clear what he wanted to know. Then the household woman who came out, there's a tradition in our community to offer water to any visitor who comes. So this woman came out with a pot of water and said, Johar. Johar is the way of welcoming. So she welcomed Justice Krishna and they started asking questions about her. What do you do? Are you a student? Etc. And it happened to be she was doing evening classes from some local college. So coming back to Delhi, he wrote a small piece about a visit to Chaibasa. And he said, me and my friend Venkatramani, and went to so and so. God. And just Krishna calling me his friend was a great, on my back. Lovely moments. So that's friendship grew. And later, when the construction workers' welfare legislation was an idea, we began to work together. I'll conclude with this, and then this idea of drafting a law for the construction workers went on from 1986 to 1992. So we worked along with a team headed by Justice Krishnaya. The good part of the law was drafted by me and two other retired secretaries of labor and one more unionist from Tamil Nadu. And that law, the draft law, was then presented to the Petition Committee of Parliament at Rajya Sabha, and after a gap of about a year and a half, almost 90% of the draft became the law. And what a joy. You were not a parliamentary draftsman, you were a draftsman. So I never knew at that point of time that I will become a law commissioner member one day. So these connections in life, I think happens to every one of us in so many ways. And then they're so beautiful to each one of us. Nothing what I've said about me is something grand and very unique. And nothing what I've said about me is something which may not happen to anybody else. But I'm only trying to say that the connections which happen, and how the connections happen is they happen elsewhere. And only all that you need to know, the connections do happen. Be alive to the connections. And as I said, be a rich human being with the ability to perceive others' pain and anguish. And I think the passion for doing justice in me is always to be able to see the pain and anguish of every human being, and if possible, go to the rescue. Thank you for your attention.